Welcome to the Treasury Update podcast presented by Strategic Treasurer, your source for interesting Treasury news, analysis, and insights in your car, at the gym, or wherever you decide to tune in. On this episode of the 2022 Outlook series, host Craig Jeffery sits down with Alan Geller, Managing Director of Rains International, to discuss the global outlook on Treasury talent. They discuss the challenges acquiring and keeping Treasury leaders, market shifts with a view to staffing, hiring, and retention, and more. Listen in to this dynamic conversation to gain valuable insights on Treasury talent for the year ahead.
Welcome to the Treasury Update podcast. Alan, it's very good to have you on again.
Craig, thank you for having me.
We are in the midst of the 2022 Outlook series, and our topic is challenges acquiring and keeping Treasury leadership. In the news, you hear a lot about the Great Resignation. You're in tune to it. I mean, that's kind of a general term. I think we want to know a little more specifics. Generally, before we get into Treasury, or maybe as a prelude to that, how bad is it about this resignation? When did it happen, if it did? And how is that at the professional level, particularly in finance? What are we learning there? What are you seeing in the statistics and in your discussions?
Well, I think for the most part, the Great Resignation has not necessarily impacted what I will call the senior professional ranks. Treasurers, assistant treasurers, directors, managers, those individuals with greater educational levels, greater educational achievements, are very much employed, and there was not really any Great Resignation there. I think the Great Resignation was probably more at the hourly level than at the more senior compensation level.
We've clearly seen things about restaurants, people that are hourly, they're having a hard time filling it. You go to the grocery store and it's like the deli is closed. The deli is closed at one of the largest grocery stores in the country. Like 4 different times I've been there. I don't know if that's COVID. It's the Great Resignation. It's an impact there. So how are you seeing this at the different levels? What are some of the indicators? Is it just by hourly versus salary? Are there other elements?
Well, I think it's a combination of two things. Certainly part of that Great Resignation has to do with COVID, in the sense of people who are sick or people who have become sick and can no longer work. I also think a significant part of that is in the service industry in particular. But I also believe it's the people who are seeming to be the ones that are not there, or the hourly. And just from a statistical perspective, the Bureau of Labor Statistics has a font of information, as you would expect. One of the things I follow on that is employment status of the civilian population 25 years or older by educational attainment. So the example I'll give you, in December of 21, a month ago, 45% of and so we're talking initially about people with less than a high school diploma. 45% of that group is participating in the labor market. Of that group, the unemployment rate is 5.9%. The interesting thing is, if you go to the high school level with a high school degree, 55% of that labor force is participating. And the unemployment rate is 4.5%. Now, it doesn't sound like a lot, between 5.9 and 4.5, but that's a 23% differential. And if you drop down to some college, 62%, almost 63% of the people are participating in the employment market. And the unemployment rate of that group is 3.3%.
I'm detecting a pattern here.
Right. That's a 44% differential from the no high school. So just think about it this way. the median earnings of a person with a bachelor's degree over the course of their 40 years working, they'll earn roughly $2.8 million. And this again is from Bureau of Labor Statistics. That's 75% more than high school only. So when you talk about the Great Resignation, it's not the people with the MBA. So just as a comparative, that group of bachelor's degree or higher, the unemployment rate for the same time frame was 1.9%. That's a 66% differential between no high school degree. So what I'll suggest, and from my experience, anecdotal experience from the groups that I work with, and I do a lot of work in the financial space, but also the Treasury space specifically, there's very little unemployment at those levels. And people are looking to hire more.
So low unemployment, looking to hire more. The next question I was going to ask you, you sort of answered part of that. It's like, what does the market look like? But I know you can go into some more detail and calibrate how we should think about that. Has this changed over time, or how has this changed over time? And then maybe you could reflect on what does this do with our efforts at retention, how we hire, especially if we're looking for more positions than existed before. Maybe you could talk to that.
Well, the interesting thing is Zoom, while it has created panel interviewing, has shortened the cycle for interviewing because there's no travel requirements. And the specific example I'll give you is an organization that I just completed a search for. They hired a new treasurer because the incumbent retired. And essentially, there were 3 senior level executives at this organization that needed to be met by the candidate. They were in the Midwest, and the candidate was in the far West. He was prepared to relocate to the Midwest. He interviewed on Thursday, Friday, and Monday. One of those each day. If we had done that in person, it would have taken 3 weeks to get it done. Because he was working remotely, he could interview whenever they were available. It made the logistic process infinitely easier. The other part of it that has developed since this, the Zoom age, if you will, is that there's more people in the interview process, but they're doing it in panels. So candidate might interview for an hour and have 6 people listening to their answers. The companies that are doing this well, where they'll interview multiple candidates, have established a strategy and a program and specific questions that are asked by a specific person, so that everybody gets the same kind of process. What it does is it prevents the candidate from having to tell the same story 6 times, because 6 people are listening to the individual at once. The companies that do this hiring process very well have established a protocol. There's a beginning, a middle, an end to each interview. Each candidate, each one of the panelists will ask 1 or perhaps 2 questions, and it will always be the same person asking the same question to different candidates. The important part of this type of interview process is that, and again, it's the companies that are doing this well, they have a wrap-up session for 15 minutes directly after the interview process is ended, while it's fresh. When you have 6 people being interviewed, when you have 6 panelists interviewing people, and each one gets a half hour, an hour, or whatever it might be, getting them together at the same time is going to be very difficult. Because if each one of the 6 panelists has a half-hour interview, you're talking start at 9, end at 12, and then at 12:15 everybody's got to get together, but they're not together necessarily. So I think the Zoom process, the Zoom age, has made the logistics a little bit easier.
So these interviews are lasting a half hour to an hour with 6 panelists interviewing. So they're moving along quickly.
Yes, there's a lot less wasted time, and because it's programmed, everybody knows what they're asking and how to get it done, and how effectively to ask the question. You ask a question to gather a specific piece of information. If you don't get it, there's a follow-up question to it, and then it moves to the next person. And because you've got the list of questions out there, and everybody's doing, there's a routine that develops among the panelists.
So there's this, web meeting, interview by panel, shortened cycle. Is this just truncating the time that it takes to have offers out and people to accept? Are there ripple effects? Are there other changes with remote work, or how is this impacting other areas of the market? You've already said it's like less than 2% unemployment,
which by the way is full employment by any economist's definition. 2% is full employment.
Like in let's say searches you're doing, how is this compressing the time cycle, and what's changing over time? I mean, I guess if we look at the last couple of years, have become the Zoom or the Teams interview cycle. When did that change during COVID, and what are the ripple effects there?
When the economy is not doing well, I think companies kind of slip back into what I'll call defensive hiring. Because the economy is not well, people have more concern about their job security. And therefore, more people, and so what they figure is more people should interview this candidate, which spreads the risk of, well, I didn't hire a bad candidate, we hired a bad candidate. So I call that defensive, as opposed to being proactive and hiring the best candidate. In a lot of cases, in a down economic sign, they'll hire the least offensive a candidate, because a lot of people just are concerned about their own job. So 100%, we're almost 2 years into this Zoom cycle, if you will. I mean, my last day in Manhattan for work was March 13th, 2020. We're now in the first quarter of 22, and I'm still not working in Manhattan. There's a variety of reasons for it, but at the end of the day, we've gotten much better at doing this than we were when it started out. And people are much more comfortable with it and understand how to do it better. And goodness, there's a gazillion tutorials on how to do this now. But a lot of this was already in process. Many companies at lower levels, they'll send you an email which will give you a link towards a video interview. And you're actually being given a question, and then you're being recorded on the answer. And this was already in progress in 2019. So we've been moving in this direction for a while, where we're getting away from a lot of the interpersonal relationships on an interview. But it's still the same thing. The big issue that we're now face is, unconscious bias and people hiring the same people all the time. There's a big part of what's going on right now that is, focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion. That's a story for another day, by the way.
Interesting comments. I guess I want to ask you too about this. What's this compression doing? If it normally would take, like that example you gave of, it might take 3 weeks for the person to be able to talk to all 3 of the top executives, and now it's been done in 3 days. What does that mean if someone's looking at 5 candidates or 2 candidates? What does that do for the hiring company, and how about for the employee who's looking for work? What's going on there?
Well, the process is being made shorter. It requires the hiring manager to be more decisive. It also helps individuals see the process much more quickly. Sometimes you cannot put a 2018 mindset in today at 2022, where candidates might go through a process. But it depends upon the hiring people. And I'll give you a perfect example. I completed a search for a vice president of mission-related investing for an organization. Candidate interviewed with the again, all on Zoom, with the CHRO on Monday. She came back and said, we need to get him in on Wednesday. On Wednesday, with 3 Zooms, he met the CEO, he met a board member, and he met the CFO. 9, 12, 1, something like that. I got an email from the CEO at about 3 saying, can we talk this afternoon? And this was the day before Thanksgiving. Okay. And I said, absolutely, I'm here to help you out. And she said, good. We talked at 4 o'clock. At 4:30, I made the candidate an offer. The entire process took 3 days. Now, the caveat is that A, the CEO knew what she wanted to hire. They'd interviewed a few people. She had not, this was the first person she actually interviewed. The CHRO had interviewed 3 candidates. This was the first one she passed through. She said, this is what I want. Now, I can pat myself on the back and say, oh, I did a great job. But it's a combination of things. The CEO knew what she wanted to hire and wasn't afraid to make a decision.
So if 2018 was a more in-person, non-Zoom, defensive mode, what is 2022?
How about TBD?
Okay, what was 2021 then?
2021 was a wonderful year. We did about 40% more searches in 21 than we did in 20. And the way that 22 is starting off, I would not be surprised to see us do, a significantly greater number in 22 than we did in 21. Everybody hears about these inflation numbers and all these other things, and it's artificial. My opinion, it's artificial. The numbers are there, but the cause of the numbers being there can be solved without a whole lot of economic stuff. As the supply chain clears up, supply will equal demand, and the equilibrium will be there. Right now, and you see, I submit to you, the economy's in really good shape. People are paying huge prices for stuff because there's more money.
That's probably that's a topic for another day too. That would be a good one, but I want to keep it on the
employment.
I'll go down a rabbit trail with you, Alan, but so as we think about companies that are hiring, you say more companies are trying to hire, the labor market is very tight. There may not have been a great resignation in the space that we're talking about primarily, but
right.
What advice do you give company leadership that needs to hire for 2022? What are the principles that we need to be looking at, paying more attention to than we did, 4 years ago or even 2 years ago?
Well, one of the prime differences that we're seeing today as opposed to 2018 are candidates are receiving more than one offer at the same time.
This is from the compressed cycle, or just people are looking more places?
No. More companies are going after the same people. So, if you get a treasurer or a CFO that's going to do an IPO, well, you can't, the real key is you can't wait around. You can't take the time to do this. You need to move as quickly as you can because, I've always operated on the premise if I can find somebody, a potential candidate, well, then somebody else can find them as well. And so you wind up in competition for candidates. That to me is a tell on the economy is in good shape because companies are hiring the same people.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting, Alan. I can remember a very stark item. We had I was having a meeting with a very senior level person, and they're like, "I've got to jump off for a bit. Can we come back at this time? I got approval to make an offer. I've got to get the offer out there before I lose the person." And I was like, well, 20 minutes won't make a difference. Like in my head, that was what I was thinking of. And so that fits into your anecdotes and storyline here, that it's like they're not, when they're in play, they're not in play for very long.
Right. There's this old physics axiom. A body at rest tends to stay at rest. A body in motion tends to be in motion. Now, I can put the body into motion, and I can't tell you why, but invariably, somebody else finds that body that's now in motion. And then there's going to be a competition for it. And being decisive is certainly, for that group of people, is certainly somebody wants to feel that way, that company A wants them, is prepared to move quickly, and knows what it wants. Ambiguity and lack of information are the worst possible things that a company can make itself seem like. So when you're talking about hiring people, do it now. Don't wait.
I think you've used the term defensive and decisive. So we need to move from, or your suggestion is that for many of these roles, move from being defensive to decisive.
Or be proactive as opposed to reactive.
Well, you've got to pick one theme, Alan. It's got to be either defensive to decisive or reactive to proactive.
Yeah, but it's, listen, that's not true. Because, Craig, there's a variety. People are different. And, some companies want to be in the top pay quartile. Some companies want to be in the middle. Some companies want to be at the 75th percentile. I have a client that they're very keen about it. We want to be at the 55th percentile. Why? Beats the hell out of me, but that's what they want. So that's what they're going to pay for. But they know what they want, and they're prepared to do something about it. The issue really comes down to, are you going to take the action? There's a commercial on for crypto.com.
Oh boy. Here we go. Fortune favors the brave, right?
Or it's also a line from Aida, the Broadway musical. But the point is, if you're going to do something, do it. Don't make the decision to sit there and not make a decision. Douglas McGregor in his black box theory said, you can make a decision to make a decision. You can make a decision not to make a decision. You can do it pro, not to make a decision, or con. Those are the three options you get. If you sit there in the middle, you're going to be the one that loses. So in order to hire and in order to retain, you have to be proactive.
I like that. So you're saying it's not one or the other. You got to have both. Reactive.
No. I'm saying there's all kinds of different places. Some places say, hey, listen, we've got this great opportunity and we're going to wait. And those companies that are going to wait invariably are going to lose their top tier candidates. But maybe they don't want to pay the top tier candidates. Like I suggested to you, some companies want to be in different places in the pay cycle. The company that's going to pay in the 25th percentile, the lower 25th percentile, is not going to get the best candidates. I have this philosophy that big companies hire better people, pay them more money. And it's a generality. But with that said, the companies that are paying the top dollars, the McKinseys, the Bains, the BCGs, the Goldman Sachs, the Morgan Stanleys, they're going to get the best talent because they're going to pay the most money. But there's other companies that maybe it's a distribution company and the margins are 1% and they're not making a lot of money. So are they going to pay the same price as a Goldman Sachs is? No. So they're not going to get the same person as the Goldman Sachs would get. That's where the differential is. Depending upon who you want. The people at the top of the ladder are generally the ones that get picked off first. If you go and take it all the way back to college graduations. So the kids that are summa or magna cum laude, they're going first. They're getting the interviews before the other people are. Because everybody wants to hire smart. How do you prove you're smart? Well, you graduated summa cum laude. You had a 3.9 GPA. I don't care if you went to Miami-Dade Junior College. You get a 4.0, you get a 4.0. So let me reverse it. Let me ask you a question, Craig. Would you rather hire somebody who's really smart or somebody who's average? And you're going to say to me, it depends upon the job, Alan.
No, I think I would for most positions, I would much rather hire someone who's smart, not just school knowledge, but able to solve problems or work on things. And so some of the smarts are different. I guess there's the creative smart. How do I build something or do something? And you need people smart for those. Others are technically smart. Others are really smart about making processes better. But I don't usually want to hire less smart. I want to hire the skills and the smart. So yeah, I guess I'm answering like you. It's like, yeah, I want both of those depending on the role.
Right. But when that person shows up and you say, boy, this person has the stuff, are you going to wait around 4 days?
No, we turn it around fairly quickly. Yeah. Once you've locked in someone that's, especially if you're a little farther in the process, if you've looked at some that aren't a fit and then you find a fit, like if the first person's pretty good, you might talk to some more, because then you have this measurement off of what's in the market today. I mean, we've had times where we've put out jobs in the market and we've had 150 people apply, and at least 20 of them were qualified and good, and other ones where it's like, it's been out there for a month and we've had one who's questionable.
Mm-hmm. But my point to you is, when you're looking for that individual that hits the top lines on both of those categories that you decided are important, you can't afford to wait around. The reason you move quickly is you don't want to lose that individual.
Yeah, if they're fit, why drag it out too?
Right. So you are somewhat of an anomaly. You have a business, you're coming at it from a business perspective, and you're saying, hey, we got to get this done, we got to get it done now, because you're a service provider, like I'm a service provider. The hiring manager who's proactive, who understands what they need to do, is the one that is going to be able to get that top-tier talent.
Yeah, I like it. Some really good points there, Alan. As we draw to a close this discussion about acquiring and keeping Treasury, leadership and what are the challenges there, any final thoughts, either extra points of emphasis or something else that we should be thinking about?
Don't be afraid. Don't necessarily hire in your own image, and recognize that talent's not going to just show up on your doorstep to show up on your doorstep. Somebody's going to have to bring it to you.
Excellent. Alan, thank you so much for all your insights and the time today.
You've reached the end of another episode of the Treasury Update podcast. Be sure to follow Strategic Treasurer on LinkedIn. Just search for Strategic Treasurer. This podcast is provided for informational purposes only, and statements made by Strategic Treasurer LLC on this podcast are not intended as legal, business, consulting, or tax advice. For more information, visit and bookmark strategictreasurer.com.